Level 1, the interim head coach. The substitute teachers of coaching. These aren't architects of dynasties or masterminds of game plans, but instead firefighters, tossed onto the hot rubble of a building that has already completely collapsed. A head coach gets fired in the middle of the season, the locker room's in complete disarray, the fan base is demanding reparations, so in steps the D-line coach trying to make sure the team still resembles professional football. Often this will give teams a short-term morale boost. If they string together a few wins, suddenly people start floating the idea that maybe this guy should get the full-time job. But more often, that Cinderella moment fades, and by January, they're politely put back in their rightful place or shown the door when a real hire arrives. In 2021, Rich Bisaccia was thrown into the mess of John Gruden's sudden exit in Las Vegas. He somehow steadied the Raiders, guided them to the playoffs, and had players openly begging the front office to keep him. Instead, he was thanked for his service and wound up as Green Bay's special teams coordinator the very next year. That's the life of the typical interim coach. On the other hand, just a couple years later, Antonio Pierce parlayed his interim opportunity with the Raiders after the Josh McDaniels firing into a head coaching gig in 2024 because the players loved him, only to prove he had no business being an NFL head coach. The fan perception is always the same. They're a babysitter, not a builder, and they might rally the locker room with a scrappy win, but everyone knows the truth. Their job is to simply make it through every Sunday for the next month or two without total embarrassment. Though sometimes they do launch a legit career. In 2012, while Chuck Pagano was away battling leukemia, Bruce Arians stepped in as the Colts interim head coach. What could have been a lost season turned into one of the most inspiring runs in recent memory. Arians guided rookie Andrew Luck to the playoffs, went 9-3 as acting head coach, and even won Coach of the Year honors. That success earned him the Cardinals job, where he built one of the NFC's most exciting teams and made another deep playoff run. And eventually, Arians capped it all off by coming out of retirement to win a Super Bowl with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. But he's the exception. The highlights of an interim's career might be just one upset victory. They're the bridge between dysfunction and hopefully finding the right man for the job. Football fans, the season is finally here, and I've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you a special offer. Right now, new customers can sign up using my promo code BEACHKID, bet just $5, and instantly get $200 in bonus bets. Just put down $5 and you've got $200 to play with right away. Personally, I love player props, but whether we're into player props, same-game parlays, or chasing the action with live betting, DraftKings has us covered. So don't miss your shot to take advantage as the season kicks off. Sign up now, bet $5, and score $200 instantly in bonus bets with promo code BEACHKID. Level 2, the failed experiment. If the interim is a babysitter, the failed experiment is a broken promise. These are the sexy hires who walked into the building with a ton of hype behind them, hailed as the savior of the franchise. Ownership sells them to the fan base as visionaries, culture changers, and geniuses in waiting. They usually come from one of two different paths. The first path is the hotshot coordinator, a relatively young offensive mind who called plays for one great quarterback, and suddenly gets handed the keys to an entire franchise. Nathaniel Hackett arrived in Denver after being the OC for Aaron Rodgers, only to spend one disastrous season mismanaging the clock, punting away games, and ultimately getting fired before he even finished his first season. Adam Gase is another classic. A supposed quarterback whisperer after being Peyton Manning's OC, he flamed out spectacularly in both Miami and New York, leaving behind gifs of his bug-eyed press conference more memorable than any wins. But defensive minds aren't immune either. Matt Patricia, fantastic coordinator, but one of the worst head coaches of the century. And the second path is the college king turned NFL pawn. NFL owners see Nick Saban win a national title at LSU, or Urban Meyer with Florida and Ohio State, and think, why not us? The problem is, leading NFL veterans isn't like lecturing 19-year-olds. Urban Meyer's stint with the Jaguars was an all-time train wreck, a 2-11 record before he was booted mid-season. Other college icons like Steve Spurrier or Chip Kelly brought hype and innovation, but quickly washed out. The jump from Saturday to Sunday has humbled many legends. The arc of the failed experiment is painfully familiar. Year 1 optimism, maybe even a playoff appearance. Year 2, the league is onto their tricks. By year 3, if they even last that long, the franchise is desperate to move on. And the coach is already eyeing a cushy coordinator job or a return to college. But just because it doesn't work out as a head coach doesn't mean you can't go right back to being a great coordinator like Josh McDaniels. Level 3, the Journeymen. Some coaches are legends, some are disasters, but perfectly in between are the Journeymen. Not bad enough to be permanently exiled from the head coaching pool, but not great enough to hold down a long-term tenure in any one place either. They're steady hands, but not cerebral enough to match the best minds in the game. Journeyman head coaches are defined by their mileage. They've had a few different head coaching gigs and left fan bases muttering, "We could do worse, but we could definitely do better." Wade Phillips was the head coach in New Orleans, Denver, Buffalo, Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston, and he did an okay job with an 82-64 career record. Marty Schottenheimer might be the most bittersweet example of this. A winner everywhere he went: Cleveland, Kansas City, Washington, and San Diego, but the most infamous playoff loser. 10, 11, 12-win seasons piled up, and yet the phrase Marty Ball became synonymous with playoff losses. Yet he was so good in the regular season that he could always find work. Then you've got Herm Edwards. Super charismatic, he could motivate any locker room, and his teams always played hard. But if you stopped paying attention to the speeches and looked at the record, not so great. Journeymen certainly aren't walking memes like the failed experiments, though. They are professionals, often lasting decades in the league, bouncing from sideline to sideline. They're just low risk, low reward, like the Ryan Fitzpatrick of coaches. Level 4, the reliable builder. This is the tier of coaches every franchise can realistically dream of landing when they're stranded in the cold coaching wilderness. They're not just placeholders, and they're not coordinators in over their heads. These are the coaches who bring order, craft winning seasons, and give their franchises an identity. The hallmark of a reliable builder is consistency. 10-win seasons, playoff berths, maybe even a Super Bowl win. But the reason they fall into level 4 rather than level 6 with the all-time greats is because teams aren't specifically fearing these guys themselves on Sundays. Pete Carroll is a perfect example. In Seattle, he took over a team in transition and quickly molded it into one of the NFL's most feared outfits. His always compete philosophy and defensive-minded approach led to the creation of the legendary Legion of Boom and a dominant stretch that included back-to-back Super Bowl appearances and one championship. Even as stars aged or moved on, Carroll kept the Seahawks competitive for over a decade, adapting his style and maintaining a culture of resilience. Now the Raiders have him as a bridge coach, hoping he can instill a winning culture there. Mike McCarthy belongs here too. Yes, he won a Super Bowl in Green Bay, but his career is defined more by consistency than dominance. Year after year, the Packers were in the playoffs, but often on the back of Aaron Rodgers, while many viewed McCarthy as the weak link. In Dallas, it was much of the same, always coming up short in January. And then there's Jim Harbaugh, who always transforms his organization. In San Francisco, he inherited a 6-10 squad and instantly flipped them into Super Bowl contenders. His fiery style, emphasis on physicality, and quarterback development helped launch the career of Colin Kaepernick and revive the 49ers franchise. After winning a national championship, he's now in his second year with the Chargers and doing it once again. Fans view this tier with mixed emotions. On one hand, these coaches save franchises from embarrassment. They deliver division titles, playoff games, and stability that is hard not to love. But on the other hand, they often hit a ceiling. Level 5, the game changer. So level 4 coaches give you stability, while level 5 coaches give you electricity. These are the young masterminds and innovators who make owners fire their obsolete, old-school coaches in search of the shiny new toy. They haven't cemented themselves in the Hall of Fame yet, but they're already shaping the NFL's future. And while due to age, they actually may not be above many of the reliable builders if you were making an all-time ranking list, they're a level above because these guys are legitimate weapons themselves. Opposing teams are as scared of them as they are their players, and they have to plan specifically to coach against them. The game changers implement the best schemes in the NFL. Sean McVay is the prototype, and arguably the best coach in the league. Hired by the Rams at just 30 years old, he instantly turned around a team stuck in mediocrity. In year 2, he had them in the Super Bowl. Within 5 years, he had a Lombardi trophy. His coaching tree exploded across the league, with half the teams trying to clone his offense by hiring anyone who had shaken his hand. McVay's youth, energy, and offensive genius made him the face of a new era. And honestly, he's not far off from level 6. Kyle Shanahan fits right alongside him. He's the designer of one of the most versatile, dangerous offenses in football. Everywhere he's been, whether coordinating for Atlanta's all-time 2016 offense or leading the 49ers, his system creates mismatches, produces stars, and racks up wins. Shanahan has had a crack at multiple Super Bowls, but he still needs that final breakthrough to begin his push for all-time great status. And the latest is Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, a McVay disciple who's quickly built a reputation as a sharp play caller, leader, and perhaps the premier quarterback guru in the NFL right now. He had Kirk Cousins headed for a possible MVP before his torn Achilles, and then revived Sam Darnold's career. Maybe Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen will be next. What sets game changers apart isn't just their records, but also their ripple effect. Defensive coordinators stay up at night trying to crack their schemes, and owners salivate at the idea of getting the next big thing. They make football feel fresh. But in order to sustain success, they have to keep evolving, because defenses adjust, copycats ruin their novelty, and for most of them, there's still a large element of potential. Right now, these coaches are lightning in a bottle and maybe just one step away from the pantheon. But Mike McDaniel, for example, is showing you can go from being seen as one of the league's sharpest offensive minds to on the hot seat in just one season. Level 6, the all-time greats. Now we're stepping into rare air. These are the coaches who define eras. Their fingerprints are all over the league, and their coaching trees sprout entire generations of head coaches. These are the names every football fan knows, whether they've watched them live or learned their legacies through reading about NFL history from before their time. Bill Walsh revolutionized offense with the West Coast system in San Francisco, taking Joe Montana and Jerry Rice and building one of the best teams ever. His influence still echoes today, with quick strike passing concepts that remain staples across the league. Bill Parcells was the opposite stylistically, but just as influential. He preached toughness, built complete teams, and left behind a coaching tree that produced names like Bill Belichick, Sean Payton, and Tom Coughlin. In Washington, Joe Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. Don Shula's Dolphins went undefeated in 1972, something that will probably never be done again. And now there's Andy Reid, the premier active all-time great, and one of the best offensive coaches ever. Andy Reid has been near the top of the league for 2.5 decades now. In Philadelphia, he turned the Eagles into perennial contenders, reaching 4 straight NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl. In Kansas City, he created the perfect situation for Patrick Mahomes to step in and dominate right away. Even in his 60s, with 3 Super Bowl rings and counting, Reid is the living bridge between the last generation and the new innovators. What separates this level is more than just trophies, though. It's also cultural impact. All-time greats inspire future coaches and become synonymous with greatness itself. Fans and opponents alike revere them decades later. But even as great as all those names were, they weren't the greatest. They came close, but there's still one seat at the very top. Level 7, the GOAT. Every conversation about the greatest head coach of all time starts and ends with Bill Belichick. 6 Super Bowl rings as a head coach, 2 more as a defensive coordinator, and 2 decades of domination. But Belichick's story didn't start with him running the NFL. He rose as an assistant under Bill Parcells, the perfect mentor for his detail-obsessed, no-nonsense approach. With the Giants in the 80s, Belichick built a reputation as a defensive genius, crafting game plans that shut down legends. His masterpiece came in Super Bowl 25, when he slowed down the high-flying Buffalo Bills and helped New York capture a title. From there, he got his first shot as a head coach in Cleveland in the early 90s, which came with mixed results. He was young, brash, and often clashed with the media. But even in that short stint, he showed signs of the coach he'd become, building a disciplined defense, beating Bill Parcells and the Patriots in the playoffs, and proving he could win. When the franchise moved to Baltimore, he was out, and many thought he'd be forgotten. Instead, he went to coach under Parcells again, first in New England, then with the Jets, before returning to the Patriots as head coach in 2000. He turned the early 2000s Patriots into a defensive force, knocking off the greatest show on turf Rams and terrorizing Peyton Manning over and over. Then the late 2000s Pats reinvented themselves as an offensive juggernaut, pairing Brady with Randy Moss to set records, and the 2010s Patriots, a chameleon dynasty, adjusting year after year, molding themselves to beat the Seahawks, Falcons, McVay's Rams, and Patrick Mahomes' Chiefs, just to name a few. Where other all-time greats thrived in one era, Belichick thrived as a head coach in 3 distinct eras. And whether it was ground and pound, passing, cheating, spying, free agency, he could do it all. His only weakness, especially towards the end of his career, was the draft. Still, he always kept the Patriots one step ahead. And he became the ultimate intimidator. With the hoodie, monotone press conferences, the aura of invincibility, opposing coaches and fans knew their teams had to play perfect football just to have a chance. I don't know who this new, washed-up version of Bill Belichick is, but he's the measuring stick for greatness in any sport. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, check out my video about the greatest season of the 2010s.